Hello, hello. Thank you for coming and checking out my channel. My name is Jennifer and this is Jen the Bookworm. And today is a little something different. I was going through YouTube like I do, and I saw a video by Murphy Napier that she just came out with not that long ago. And it was talking about how reading has changed over time, and with the influences such as BookTok and BookTube and Bookstagram and stuff like that. Making reading a social event has changed it some. But some of what was being said, not necessarily by her, but by some of the articles she referenced and stuff, kind of made me feel like, well, I have my opinions on this too. And they differ a little bit from Murphy, but not by a lot. I feel like I have a different perspective, perhaps, because Murphy, she said she's been doing BookTube for like 7 years. I've been doing it for 8 months or something like that. I haven't been doing it for very long, and I have a much smaller platform than she does, and maybe I'm just screaming out into the void, and nothing will come of it. But I wanted to join the conversation. I wanted to have an opinion, and I want it to be able to be heard, and maybe a couple of the people that are on my BookTube who subscribe to me, who have a platform of their own, might want to weigh in and give their opinion of how reading has changed, if it's changed for the better or whatnot. But specifically what I want to talk about was this notion that reading is being ruined by social media, which seems to be an underlying current of what some of these articles are saying. So I have a couple of things that I want to cover in talking about this topic. First of all, I want to cover comparing the ways that you read to the ways that other people read. Then I want to talk about how you access social media and how that affects the way you do what you do, and the growing concern with the amount of people who are accessing literature at all. And should we really be yucking somebody else's yum when reading is a dying hobby? So first, talking about comparing the way you read to how others read. This is not a new thing. People have been comparing the way that they do a hobby, any hobby, to the way somebody else does the hobby for a long time. Now, some people have said on various BookTubes, various people that I watch, and I really only watch BookTube. One of the articles that I'm accessing really was talking about BookTok, but I think it applies to BookTube and Bookstagram and all those things. But I really only do YouTube. I don't TikTok, and I don't Instagram, and I do Facebook occasionally. Would that be BookBook if we did BookTube, book? Anyway, occasionally I'll post a video on there just so that my friends and family can see what I'm up to. I have seen some people comment about the way that they read and how that has changed now that they are doing BookTube or following BookTube. And I have to say that it has definitely changed the way I read, but not in a bad way. Watching people do what they do has inspired me to read more books. I used to read maybe 20 books in a year, maybe. And then when I found BookTube, when my first official month of doing, a TBR and all that stuff was July of 2022. And I read on average about 3 books a month. Now I read on average about 5 books a month, because reading is a skill, just like playing the violin is a skill. The more you do it, the more practiced you get at it, the faster you get at it. And that is so true. Plus, I am finding different ways to incorporate it into my life because I'm making it a priority. Whereas before, I enjoyed reading, but it wasn't really a priority in my life. I would say I prioritized Minecraft a lot more than I do now. And I prioritize reading more than I did then. And I'm reading more. So, yes, it has changed the way I read. I've never actually done an organized TBR. This is what I'm planning to read for the month. Did I achieve that? midway through, am I freaking out because I'm not doing what I said I was going to do, or am I on track and everything's going great? And then at the end of the month, wrapping up and saying, wow, this is what I accomplished in this month worth of reading. I've never done that before BookTube, but I would say that has really focused my reading in a way that I wasn't focused before. Before, I would get done with a book and then I'd put it down and I had no direction as to where I wanted to go next. So sometimes I would just go days without reading anything until I got the gumption again, and then I would go looking for a book, and it was all very unorganized. And now it's much more efficient. I know next on the list is this, and I read that. But if I don't feel like reading it, I don't feel like, I put it out on a video, and so now I must do it. So I don't feel like it's adversely affected me. But I do know, I have heard some people say pushing themselves the way that they do to read more, or to read certain things, or to read, when they read so much in one genre, it causes a burnout, and that they feel less inclined and they go into a slump. Some people stop making videos for a couple of months and then come back all refreshed and everything. Everyone's different. Everyone's got their own tolerances for how long they can sustain this hobby and how many books that they want to read. There was quite a few resolutions in December and January about reading less books this year, presumably because they feel like they have pushed themselves to read so much that they aren't enjoying it as much anymore. And so good for them for figuring that out and regulating that for themselves, But aside from these things, I believe that BookTube and probably Book Talk and stuff for other people has really helped me as a reader, and has gone so far away from ruining reading for me as enhanced reading for me. But there are some judgments out there regarding how people do this hobby, and it's not new. It's not new to say you do this hobby differently than me and you shouldn't, or you do it wrong. How many times have we heard or talked about the fact that people have said, well, you read fantasy? That's not real. Now it's got a lot more traction. Fantasy is definitely a genre that people read far more. But it used to be, if you were reading fantasy, that's not real reading. That's, and how many times have we heard that, like, comics are not real reading, or manga or whatever. I was kind of guilty of that when I was younger. I met somebody who he liked to read comics, and I was a reader. I was a reader of books. And when he said he read comics, I'm like, that's not the same. I'm not reading Garfield and the Peanuts and stuff. I'm reading stories. And he's like, have you ever read a comic book? And I said, no. Why would I? So he gave me X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, to be specific. And he says, read this. And so I did. And I did grudgingly. Like, I was all sorts of above it, But then I read it. And I was very surprised. But there was actual story development, character development. They used big words. And I'm sitting here thinking, I thought comics were for like 12-year-olds or something like that. And if it is, wow, it's really introducing the average kid or young adult to big concepts, big words, really, with a really, beautiful artwork as well to go along with it. And it completely changed the way I thought about comic books. And I actually read quite a lot of Uncanny X-Men during that summer. But it really changed, the way I thought about reading. And it was really kind of pompous and jerky of me to even utter the words, oh, you read comic books? That's not real reading. But, you live and you learn, you know, and I did. I learned that at a young age. And now how people read, that is so personal to them. Now, some people on BookTube or BookTok, they have decided to really incorporate a lot of different aesthetics into their reading. Like, you know, you've seen the videos. A couple years ago, it was real popular to reorganize your bookshelf by color. So there's a rainbow gradient going across your bookshelves, and people are, you know, would do this, make a video of them doing this, and then other people would be like, rad, I'm gonna go tear down my bookshelves and redo it, although they probably didn't say rad. But, you know, they were gonna tear up their bookshelves and redo it in a color coded, you know, gradient, rainbow sort of way. And then other people are, I'm going to organize it by height. And so then, you know, that became a thing. And then somebody out there said, I'm going to wrap all the books that I haven't read in brown paper packaging, so you have a visual of what's on my bookshelf that I've read and what I haven't read. And I'm going to turn all the books backwards that I have read so that you can see only the ones that I haven't read, and, you know, give you a visual of this is where I'm at with what I've purchased and what I've read. And then people are, you know, start to go, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. Why would you go through and do that? Why would you go through all the time of wrapping up all your books and then you have to unwrap your books? And why? Why do you do that? You do it for content creation. You do it for the views. Okay. What does that hurt? Who does that hurt? If somebody wants to wrap up all their books in brown paper packaging to create a cool visual on their bookshelf, that doesn't hurt me. And it certainly doesn't affect how many words I read that day or how many books I read that month. It doesn't affect me and my reading how somebody else does their hobby. Now, when I first started BookTube, or started watching BookTube before I even started a channel of my own, there was somebody that I saw. She liked to do journaling about her books. So she had a journal, and it had like a square on one part of the page where she would print off and paste the book cover over that spot. And then there was a place for her to color in or to put stickers for her star rating, and then some lines for her to by hand write what she thought of this book, her emotions or her feelings about it. And then she kept this journal. So she was accessing her 2021 journal to show, here are the books that I read and stuff like that. And I was looking at that like, I would never do that. Not because I didn't think it was cute. It was cute. It just, oh my God, the time. I mean, bravo for her for having that kind of time. I don't. And then afterwards, when I did complete this book, this journal, it would sit on a shelf and collect dust because I don't think I'd go back and look at it. Even my picture books. I don't go back and look at my picture books more than once or twice, or once every year or two. You know, I don't have time for that. It's not that I'm not a nostalgic person. I am, but I don't do that. So the chances that I would open up my journal, my reading journal, from 2021 to let's see what I've read and what I thought about it. And so it's pretty minimal chance that I would ever do that. So to me, it feels like it would be an enormous time sink into something that I wouldn't get any value from. But this person gets value from doing it. More power to her for doing it. Doesn't hurt me. Doesn't change how many books I'm reading. It, you know, she wants to do a video on it. If I don't want to watch it, I just don't watch it. I don't go on there and watch it and then downvote it and then write a nasty comment to her about how she's wasting her time because it would feel like too much of a time commitment for me. Maybe it's not for her. And it's how she decides to do her hobby. I don't know why people gotta crap on the way people do their own hobby. It doesn't hurt anything. Also, there's a lot of judgment about why people are reading what they're reading and not necessarily how they're doing their hobby, but why they're doing their hobby. There was an article that I accessed and it says, it's another thing entirely to only engage with poetry and compilations that stitch together mangled pieces of poems, or to read Russian novels for the pleasure of being seen with them. And then it goes on to say, you know, that people who read these, like the classics or Russian novel or whatnot, come away with only half an understanding of it. And how does that benefit? Well, they got half an understanding of it. Good on them for trying. Good on them for trying to read something that was outside their comfort zone. And if they only read the book because they wanted to appear cool, who cares? How does that hurt you? How does that hurt me? It doesn't. Maybe somebody who is reading some, like I read a classic last year. I read John Williams Stoner, and I read it because a lot of other people on BookTube was reading it and saying how great it was, and I got swept up in it and I wanted to read it. I also agree that it was great, but if I went on there and said, if I went on BookTube and said, this is a great book and you should read it, and somebody else picked it up and then fell in love with the classic, then that's great. Now, if my intention was to make myself look cool or whatever, whether I accomplish that or not, it doesn't actually affect the end goal. The end goal was they picked up the book and they read it and it was great. We're spreading literacy. We're not hurting literacy, in my opinion. So, plus that whole comment seems so judgmental. It's like, well, they didn't understand the concepts of whatever, you know. They tried and they got out of it what they needed to get out of it. Maybe they only came away with it with half an understanding, but maybe it spoke to them in that moment. Maybe it did something for them in that moment that it never did or never will do for you. But books are so very personal. Each person can access a book and get something different from it, and that's okay. It's okay if I walk away with a different understanding of a book than you do. You know, it's perfectly fine. You know, right now I'm involved in a great big read-along of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. There are a bunch of people doing this, and I have to think there's probably one or two people on there who didn't have any intention to read A Song of Ice and Fire, but got swept up in it, and decided, I'm going to do this because some of my favorite booktubers are doing that. That's great. Maybe they love it. Maybe they find something new that they've never read before that they love. And that's because the influence of people on BookTube. And I think that that's awesome. So far from believing that BookTube or BookTok or whatever is destroying reading just because they do it differently and because they make their reading hobby into a craft hobby and they're showing that off. Because they buy a bunch of books and show off in a haul only to just unhaul those books in a couple weeks. This is another comment that was made, and I've never seen that. I follow quite a few people and I see their hauls. I like to see what people are interested in, what people are buying, because I don't go to bookstores. So I see people going to bookstores, they get like 10 or 12 books that they want to read, they talk about them, and then in the next couple of weeks, those books do make a reappearance because now they are reading some of them. They don't always read all of them because, as we all know, and I've said this before and I've heard other people say it too, book buying and book reading are two different hobbies that only sometimes commingle. So sometimes you buy things because it looks good, or sometimes you get caught up in a really cool title or something like that, and so you pick it up, but then it doesn't fit into your TBRs when you're, planning on what you're reading or whatever. And one day you might pick it up kind of like, oh, I remember I bought this book, and you pick it up and you read it and you love it or you hate it or whatever. But maybe you never pick it up and then you decide to unhaul it a couple years later. It's not hurting you that's the way that they do their thing. And we shouldn't be judging that. We really shouldn't be crapping on the way other people access their hobby. So that's my first point. This second point, I think, lends itself a little bit more to the topic of social media. And I think that it's important to remember, especially when ever so often there's a flare-up of, is the internet doing this thing, or is social media doing this thing, or whatever. Is it bad? Is it good? Is YouTube good? Is BookTok, TikTok good? Whatever. It's not. It's not good and it's not bad. It's a tool and it's how you use it. And sometimes, unfortunately, people use it to compare themselves to other people. And one of two things ends up happening sometimes. not always, but one or two things sometimes ends up happening, which is they compare themselves and they feel like they failed because they didn't meet some criteria that this person on YouTube met, or they feel like that person, like they couldn't have done what they're saying they're doing, so they're a liar. For instance, if I watched a booktuber who said I read 13 books in the month of June, so they might review these books. Here's, in a wrap up, like my June wrap up, I read 13 books. Here's what they were. Here's how I liked them. Here's the star rating. Here's the favorite one I had this month, or whatever. Now I could look at that and go, wow, they read 13 books. I only read 5. I suck. Maybe I shouldn't be a booktuber. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. If I can't read that amount, maybe this isn't for me. This is I'm just out of my league, and I only read 5 books. That sucks. I suck. Spiral. And that's awful. That's awful. Why would you do that to yourself? Now, I have never seen anybody on BookTube say, I read 13 books and I'm better than you because I read these 13 books. And I'm just wanting to let you know how much better than you I am. I've never seen that. Some people compare themselves and then they use that to beat themselves up, and you should not do that. You shouldn't beat yourself up because you don't know what this person's level of time restraints are. Some people have jobs that they can listen to audiobooks while they're working, and some people have a house full of kids and or are a single parent or whatever, and they just don't have the kind of time that the person on BookTube that they're watching has. Or maybe they don't have the kind of money to buy a bunch of hardback, gilded edged, leather bound, sprayed edged, beautiful artwork books. I mean, maybe you don't have the kind of money that they do, or whatever. You compare yourselves, and it's something that you could fairly compare. You're not them and they're not you. And maybe they have a different skill in reading, like maybe they're faster, or maybe they comprehend more, or maybe less, but you can't compare yourself to them. And if you compare yourself to them in order to beat yourself up, give yourself a break. Don't do that to yourself. That's not nice. That's not cool, And it kind of puts an undue pressure on the booktuber if you write on there about how you suck because, or whatever. So, but sometimes people take it another way and they go on there and they say, I didn't read 13 books in a month. I don't think I've ever read 13 books in a month. Therefore, this person couldn't have read 13 books in a month. And I'm going to say that they didn't read 13 books in a month, or maybe they just skimmed them, which for whatever reason makes that, more insidious or whatever. They just skimmed the books. They didn't actually read. They couldn't have, because I can't do it. They can't do it. I'm going to go on there and tell them I think they're fake. And it's just, so if you're using social media to be mean to somebody else or to be mean to yourself, it's not that social media is bad. It's the way you're using it is bad. And you should maybe not do it like that. Again, crapping on how somebody else does their hobby, or crapping on yourself. Give yourself a break. Realize that you're in a different place than that person is. And, keep doing what makes you feel happy. Allow them to do what makes them feel happy. If you think that they really are faking, if the way they're presenting themselves, the way that they are presenting how they do their hobby and stuff bothers you, stop watching them. I have been consuming YouTube videos for probably 10 years or so now. And I think that, I don't remember what I started using YouTube for. But then I was doing a lot of Minecraft, and so I was watching a lot of people do Minecraft, and I consumed quite a lot of that, and my feed was just full of Minecraft stuff. And I like to watch people react to a cappella groups, pentatonics, and voice play and stuff like that. Is just something I enjoy watching, and so I got a lot of that in there. Now I'm researching homeschooling, so I've got a lot of that in there. But I never heard of BookTube, BookTok, Bookstagram, nothing like that. For 10 years I've been on YouTube, and I only heard about BookTube in early 2022. And the reason is because I was looking through a review on Audible, and it said Daniel Green was right. This book is awesome. I'm like, who's Daniel Green? Why are they saying it as if I should know who that is? So I looked up who that was, and I saw he does book reviews and stuff like that, and book news and stuff on YouTube. So I clicked on one, and then I clicked on another, and then I watched a whole bunch of Daniel Green, and because of that, the algorithm says, ooh, she's into books. Let's start feeding in some BookTube. Now, if I would have at that point said, this isn't for me, I don't like the way, this seems fake, this seems stupid, this seems whatever, all I had to do was stop clicking on it. It would have gone away, and clicked on my Minecraft stuff and Pentatonics and whatever, and my feed would be flooded with that stuff, and I would never have to watch another BookTube thing ever again. I choose to watch BookTube. You choose to watch BookTube. You're watching this, you're choosing to watch this. If you don't like it, you don't have to. No one's twisting your arm. No one's telling you you have to conform to some way of reading in order to be part of the BookTube community. And no one's trying to make you feel bad because you do or don't do more or less than what a BookTuber does. And so if you're using your social media to beat up on yourself or beat up on somebody else, consider not doing that anymore. It's not healthy for you, and it's not nice to them. So I don't believe that social media is ruining reading, though I do think that there are some people who might be trying to ruin it for others, and that's unfortunate, but that's the way it always is. It's unfortunate, and I wish people wouldn't do that, but I don't think that's the fault of social media. It's how you use the social media. And my last point that I really want to touch on is there are some statistics out there. When I was researching this topic, there was a lot of information out there about reading and about literacy today. You know, I read this report, and I'll link it down below, but it was called Reading at Risk, and it had a couple of things I'll pop up on the screen to show you what I'm looking at. One of them said the percentage of adult Americans reading literature has dropped dramatically over the last 20 years. Less than half the adult population, American population, now reads literature. And they view, when they're talking about literary reading, they're talking about reading of novels, short stories, poetry, and drama in any print form, including the internet. Any type was admitted, from romance novels to classic poetry. So anything. And it's declining rapidly. And that says a lot about, and I'm just talking about America right now. And I hope that I have, I know I have a couple people from like Canada, and I hope that I get or have other people from other places. But if it's happening in America, it's possible that it's happening elsewhere too, where people are just not accessing books as much as they used to. People are not reading like they used to. Literary reading is declining among all education levels. I went onto this website because I'd heard this statistic before, and I looked it up this time and found it. It said 33% of high school graduates never read another book the rest of their lives. 33%. 42% of college graduates never read another book after college. 70% of the U.S. adults have not been in the bookstore in the last 5 years, and 80% of U.S. families did not buy or read a book last year. Now, this was on an article from 2019, and so maybe those are slightly different now, but that's frightening. And when I heard it back in 2019. I was working at the time, and when I heard that statistic, I was I'm a reader, so that didn't seem that seems scary. That didn't seem plausible to me. So I asked the girls that I worked with, hey, do you guys read? One of them I knew was a reader. I was like, how many books have you read, recently? Or what are you reading right now? Or whatever. We talked about it a little bit. There was another girl. I was like, are you a reader? What's the last thing you read? And she's like, oh, the last thing I read was in high school. I couldn't even tell you. I don't read books. And because I'm a reader, because I come from people who are readers, and my siblings are readers and stuff like that. I guess I just assumed everyone was to some degree. But no, not everyone is. And so we talk about that, and we see that, and we see these numbers, and when people like me who are readers look at that and go, holy crap, we need to get books in people's hands. So when you're feeling that way, when you feel like, wow, reading is going away, nobody wants to read anything anymore. If that's the case, should we really be judging people for what they're reading? Should we really be looking down our nose at them if they want to read something differently than us, or if they want to read in a different way than us? And even if they're only accessing the classics in order to look cool, at least they're accessing the classics. And if they, only have certain books on their bookshelves so that they can influence other people, perhaps they influence other people to get those books who do actually read them. Do we wish that everyone read everything that we liked? Sure. I guess we do. And as a writer who hasn't really published anything in a really long time, but if I published a book tomorrow and 100 people bought it and then never read it, it wouldn't really hurt me that nobody read it. I guess my book would do better if they did read it and review it and say, hey, this is great, you should read it too. But if 100 people bought a book of mine and then stuck it on their shelf and never read it, I still get the revenue from 100 people buying a book, After they give over their money, the author is not very often affected any longer, unless, of course, they go through and they review, and their review reaches people who makes those people want to buy a book and such. But just having a book on their shelf, if they want to have War and Peace on their shelf just to make you think that they read War and Peace, okay. Maybe that influences someone to go out there and read War and Peace because they want to be like this person. It doesn't hurt reading. Social media doesn't hurt reading. People misusing social media might be hurting reading. And with so few people, comparatively, accessing books nowadays, much less than they were 20 years ago, perhaps we should be kinder to people who really are trying, or even if we think that they're fake or that their reasons are not, purely for the love of reading. Okay, let that be their reasons, and don't let that influence you. You do you. You do you the way you want to. You do reading the way it feels good to you, and read as much as your heart desires. And don't let somebody else tell you that you can't or shouldn't do your hobby the way it feels good to you. I know this was kind of rambly and maybe a little preachy, and I'm sorry if I made anyone feel like, wow, pretentious. Click. But I hope that didn't happen. I hope you're still here with me and you listen to what I have to say. I had an opinion and I felt like I needed to say it. I hope that I'm opening a conversation or continuing a conversation where other people will take up the mantle and talk about maybe their experiences on BookTube and how it's affected their reading. Maybe my experience, most likely my experience, is not indicative of everyone else's experience. So I'd like to see, if you are a booktuber and you want to take up this subject or some subject adjacent to it and make a video, I would love that. Please, if you do that, tag me to it. Let me know. I will watch. I will be interested in continuing this conversation. But if you're not a booktuber, you still have things to say, please leave me some comments down below. Let me know. If you've got some opinions to speak, I am here to listen to them. I would like to have a conversation with you or with anybody. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a like. Consider subbing. If you didn't enjoy this, I hope that you did just click off then, but you know, you can always leave me a comment that said was not my cup of tea, but whatever. However you want to react to this video is fine. But I would appreciate if you enjoyed it, to like it, to sub it, sub it, and to share it with other people. Try to get the conversation going, because I think it's important I think it's an important topic. I think that I had a worthy opinion, and if you agree or if you disagree, I'd like to hear it. So I really appreciate you coming and spending this time with me, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.